Testing 1, 2. Okay, good evening, ladies. Um, with I would say without further ado, but I guess it's apt. It's a Friday, and this is a unique occasion for us to be able to convene to hear from um, a fountain of knowledge, of wisdom, the voice of one that we hold very dear. It's 60 minutes with her, and I know that she needs no further introduction, but I think it's fair to have a few words to say about her. She's a lady that a lot of us look up to. There are a number of us that have her either as a direct mentor, indirect mentor, a sponsor, or has been a line manager, a boss, and for quite a few, I'm sure, for many of us, a role model, somebody to look up to. We are honored with her presence today, and I know that she must have had to make a bit of a sacrifice to carve the 60 minutes that she's going to spend or less with us today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our CE for Africa regions, whom we all know well, Mrs. Sola David-Borha.
Thank you. Thanks for that kind introduction. Um, it's been a very interesting 6-7 months. I moved in March to Johannesburg, and all I've been doing is learning, trying to understand, the role. I've been traveling a lot to get to meet the teams in countries, understand the challenges they face, the opportunities. I've been involved in many governance meetings. There's so many stakeholders. When you're sitting here, you don't realize how many stakeholders you have to engage with. It's until you get there, then you think, wow. And I haven't gone through it all. It's a continuous exercise. There's a whole army of people that are supporting Africa regions, which you don't have a clue, but they're doing a critical work, and it's important to sort of understand what they're trying to do, and how we can work together, in a better way, ultimately to grow the franchise. Nigeria is the largest investment that Standard Bank has out of South Africa, so that's why there's always a lot of attention and pressure, and everybody. When you mention Nigeria, everybody gets excited. But it's a wonderful group. I've had such a warm welcome. Everybody has been so supportive, and I really can't complain. God has been faithful. He has been with me, and I'm settled in Joburg. So anytime people will come, you have to check me up. So in deciding what to talk about today, given the short notice, I didn't have time to really prepare anything, but a few weeks back, I think it was in September, Pricewaterhouse in Joburg had asked me to come and talk to their female talent. I think they have an annual thing for Women's Day. So I prepared a couple of slides, nothing stressful, just pictures really, and talked to it. I'm not sure I need to. You guys know me now. I need to summarize myself. I usually try and do that first, but okay, in the interest of any new person who is here, So, I'm married. I always get confused when I say how many children do I have. I have a grown-up stepson who's married, so he's a big man on his own, and then 2 younger ones. A 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. They adopted me, I always say. I didn't adopt them. Wonderful, wonderful gifts from God. And I've been married now for, I think this is my 21st year. And for anybody who is married, which many of you are, You know, it's a continuous learning exercise. You never get there. You never get there. I studied economics in UI, then did an MBA at Manchester Business School, and I've been in banking throughout my entire career. I started with Now Merchant Bank, which is now part of Sterling, I think. I was there for 4 years, and then when the banking sector liberalization took place in the late 80s, um, Investment Banking and Trust Company Limited was formed, so I was part of the foundation team along with Mr. Side, and I was there from '89 um, to date. But obviously, it's been a journey. There's been two sets of mergers, one in 2005 with Chartered and Regent, and then in 2007 with Stanbic. And so the industry has evolved, very different now from how it was then. And I think change is the constant. Change is always the constant. And I'm here. I never thought I would survive all those mergers, and because they were quite traumatic, especially even I think the one that was more traumatic, I think, was the Stanbic merger, partly because one had to learn a whole new set of policies, ways of doing things, and you had to do it quickly. So it was quite overwhelming, and you had to be running the bank as well. You had to be doing your job. So, but God helps me. I just hung in there, and I'm still here. So yeah, so and I've played different roles, across my career, and tried as much as possible to learn and add value, as required. So I wanted to talk very briefly about change, and use as a case study a lady. How many people have heard of Najat Belkacem? You have? Put up your hands. Quite a few. Okay, yeah. So you know, she's the current Minister of Education and Research in France, and she was once herding sheep and goats in Morocco as a shepherd girl. And you ask yourself, how did she become the minister? Obviously, there were certain things that she had to go through and experience, you know, to achieve what she did. And essentially, her father had first moved, and the family moved to join him in France. And it was obviously a huge challenge. Talks about it different. She didn't understand. The language was different. The culture was different. Everything was different. So she had to learn a lot. If you move to the next slide, which I think I don't know how the steps will just come up. Let me wait for all of them to come up, then I'll talk through them. Yeah. So I titled the first step a discomfort zone, because many times we don't want to leave our comfort zones. It could be moving to another department, it could be moving to another region, another country, whatever it is. We are just very comfortable doing what we want, and the thought of change terrifies us, but without change you can't grow. That's the reality. If you continue to do what you're doing, for a long time, it's very unlikely that you will grow. You stretch yourself. I mean, I've grown so much in just the 6 months. I know things now that I didn't know before, and you can only do that when you leave familiar ground. So, you see a young girl move into a completely different country. And then integration and alignment, obviously, she had to learn the language, she had to learn the culture, she had to make friends, etc. And for us, how I will kind of just replicate that is we must learn to integrate to the culture where we are. And I'm assuming it's the right culture, so we're not talking about doing anything wrong. But we're basically saying that it's our own responsibility to make sure that the same way that one had to adapt to a new way of doing things, when Standard Bank effectively acquired the legacy IBTC chartered bank, you don't really have a choice. Many times you find people saying, "Oh, I remember counseling a lady once. She had worked in, I think she had been working in a Nigerian financial institution and had moved to Standard Chartered, and she was struggling, had a matrix and all of that, and she kept on saying, "Yeah, but this is not how we used to do it." So I said, "You've moved. You've got to change your mindset. You're in a completely different setting. And as long as what they're asking you to do is not something wrong, you have to change. It's not them that's going to change, but the realization that you have to change, is the beginning of change. And, you have to align with the new way of working, align with new policies, no matter how challenging it is. Competence, obviously, she went to the best schools. She got a scholarship to one of the best colleges in France. So obviously she acquired all the skills that she needed to become a minister. Attitude, I think, is critical. Your competence can only take you so far. Can only take you so far. At the end of the day, what separates people many times is the attitude that you have. And I remember a story being told of when a vacancy arose, and they were trying to decide between a woman who had lots of experience, over 20 years of experience, and a young man who was relatively new and, was obviously still learning a lot. And, there are always pros and cons for every appointment. I tell people, even my own appointment, there are people who think it's a good idea. There's people who don't think it's a good idea. And everybody has a right to have their view, But the more important thing is that you must have a critical mass that would say, okay, you know what, on balance, we would like to go with that person. And in that story, they said they actually decided to go with a younger man, even though the woman had much more experience, because I always sing this song, promotion is not a right. It is not a right, okay? What is a right is that you come and you get your salary, you do your work and you get your salary. But in terms of, who occupies a particular role, there are so many different variables that are taken into consideration in determining who occupies a role. If, it could be president of Nigeria, it could be the governor of central bank. It doesn't mean that a deputy governor will become the central bank governor. It varies to, there are too many people from one part of Nigeria in government, so they now want to put another person, or they want, all kinds of variables that you have no control over. The most important thing I always say is that at least be part of the short list of people that are being considered. That's progress. And then the final decision anyway is not yours, and sometimes you can't do anything about coming from a particular region or whatever, but at least you're in the short list. So, but attitude is important. And going back to that example, it was like, look, this young guy is willing to learn, he listens. So even if they know he doesn't know, but because of his willingness and ability to learn and grasp, they were willing to take a risk on him rather than have somebody else who was obviously much more competent, but their perception was it'll be a struggle, to get the person to change. So attitude is so important, making sure that we have the right attitude when we're facing people, issues, whatever it is. And, always trying as much as possible to deal things in a manner that is constructive, that is not, in Nigeria, we're very vocal. When we're having a conversation, I think we're fighting. So people get alarmed. so you have to learn. You have to train yourself that, okay, I can actually lower the decibels and maybe put things in a more gracious way, and you find out that it's better received, because you've communicated in a way that didn't appear threatening. People don't like feeling threatened, when they're having engagements. So moving on to focus, obviously you have to stay focused. There's so many things that can distract you. Everything and anything can distract you. I didn't like the way they spoke to me. I didn't, you know, or even things like sexual harassment. It's a distraction. And we mustn't allow any type of challenge to derail us from our focus, which is, why are we here? What are we doing here? I'd rather be in my family. I'd rather be, in many other places. But the fact that I'm here trying to pursue a professional career, I must stay focused on that and not allow difficulties or people coming with one thing or another to distract me from my goal. There's an image that I have in my mind of the Boston Marathon, and I think it was Mo Farah, where he was running and was about to win, and it was during some crazy guy jumped in and tried to stop him, just lunged at him, and all he did was to just move out of the way, reflex action, and he kept on running, and he won. If he had waited to be engaging while a madman is trying to stop him from running, somebody else would have won, and it'll just be history. They'll be, arrest the man and everything. There will always be things that will distract you. The most important thing is to stay focused, keep on adding value, and deal with issues as best as you can. Going on to integrity, all of us is a continuous struggle. I tell people that if you don't make any mistakes and you're 100%, then I have a lot of respect for you. I struggle all the time, and because the thing with integrity is you actually don't know how you will manage a situation until you've got there. Yeah, people say, but I thought this person was a Christian, or this person was godly, or how can he do such a thing as minister? None of us here know how we will behave if suddenly we had $100 billion. Have you ever had it before? Even me, I can't guarantee or vouch that I'll be normal. Yes, you must have had it, behaved, and come back. Then for us to know that, okay, this person, can manage it. You actually don't know how you behave, when you come across different types of pressure. So there is because of that realization, that should sort of keep you in check. I even say the KPMG thing can happen to any organization. It's easy. One can't say holier than thou that, how could they have done it? It can happen. Many of these things are judgment calls, which at the time, they don't seem as dangerous as they are now. Or it starts in a very small way, which is harmless. And suddenly you find you're in the middle of one big scandal. You don't know how it happened. You don't know how the lapse is. It can happen to any organization. But the most important thing is, what do you do when these kind of things happen? How do you recover? How do you get out of it? How do you get back on track? You've got to first of all accept responsibility. Like, okay, we are accountable. We did the wrong thing, and what do we need to do to address, to prevent this from happening again and move forward, But integrity is something that we have to continue to work at. It's not, I'm not a believer that you have people who are good and people who are bad. Not at all. But having said that, it is important that we, in our DNA, in our construct, we must want to do the right thing. We must want to do the right thing, We all make mistakes, but your intention is to do the right thing. And once you're corrected, you quickly correct your ways and you move on. And people who don't really believe they need to do the right thing are dangerous people. Especially when they are clothed in professionalism. Many of the frauds you see, have colleagues, who have different types of values. So fundamentally, the values that this group uphold is compliance and doing the right thing. And when we do make mistakes, we've got to make sure that we correct ourselves. And I think the last point is just higher purpose. It's not about us. It's not about us. As much as we want to do well in our careers, as well as much as we want to, we want to succeed, everybody wants to succeed. But the paradox is when you are pursuing your own ambition in a way that focuses on yourself and yourself alone, it is difficult to actually get to where you want to get to. In the sense that a leader must put others before themselves. You know, Mandela put the country before his own personal interest. So leadership is not about you. It's not about you, and that's the paradox of leadership, and the fact that it is sacrifice. It's about putting your organization first before yourself. You know, what does the organization want me to do? You know, and if you are able to do it, you're available to do it, you do it. You know, and I always say there is no organization that sees people sacrificing, putting the organization before themselves, that if that person has a challenge, will not rise to support that person. You know, because it is clear that time and time again, that person has run some hard yards, has done things that, you know, it was obviously a sacrifice for them to do. So it's not about you. It's about having a higher purpose. And, you know, I was interviewed for a magazine recently, and they asked me a question that, am I ambitious? So I thought about it, you know. So I said, I don't think so, but I think I'm purposeful in the sense that I would like to do things that have a purpose. I'd like to add value in a way that is purposeful, you know. But I think self-ambition is a dangerous thing, and we just have to guard against it and channel whatever energies we have in a way that focuses really on others, on the bigger picture, rather than our own narrow interest. And, you know, just running through that storyline, I think those are part of what must have helped Najat become such an eloquent, competent, polished woman. She's married to a Frenchman. I think she has 2 children. And I think even her sister is a qualified lawyer in France, you know. So, and she's faced lots of challenges. They have abused her. They said she's, if you read the press, they said, you know, the far left, I mean the far right in France, you know, that she's a immigrant. They accused her of having an affair with, I can't remember which president, Holland. You know, they just nonsense talk, which can only distract. You have to keep focused. You have to keep focused on where you're going, you know. And I always say the only people who don't get criticized are those who are dead and buried. As long as they are breathing, as long as they have life, somebody will criticize you. So thanks very much, and I'm happy to take questions.
You can sit down. Let's excuse you to sit down. I guess it's better for her to sit. Okay. Thank you very much. Our own Sola DB. Can we appreciate time once again? We're happy to have you around. It's a great privilege. And I was actually taken aback when you said you are still on training. I'm saying, what? If Shola is still on training, who am I? So you are in training school, guys. We are all in your training school. We are happy to have you as our mentor. I'm one of our mentees. I remember when I was struggling with my career, I walked up to her crying. She said, you can cry. You're very free to cry. But guess what? You have future in this bank. Go and sit down and do your work. Gently. I said, eh? You must have read my story in the Blue Women magazine, you know. Mad, stupid step. So we are all here. Shola is here for us free. We are not charging anybody for this training. Question and answer. I'm not going to start my own because if I have any at all, I'll ask my question last. So the floor is free to engage Shola. Okay. So we take 3 questions. She will respond to the three and then trust you.
Yes, yes. So good evening again, Shola. We never tire to hear from you. We're all big members of your fan club. You agree, yes, ladies?
Yes.
Yes, correct. So Shola, I'd like to ask you a question around female sponsorship. And I ask because that's a question and a conversation that goes around, specifically around women deliberately sponsoring women. I know that mentorship happens, and a lot of us are very grateful for the mentorship. But sponsorship is something that has become a big conversation, and also to ask your views around female sponsorship. Thank you very much, Shola.
Thank you. Next. Shola Karina, you have a question for our Shola. Okay.
Okay. Thanks once again, Shola. Being in South Africa, how have you been able to sort of settle in with different cultures? They're totally different from the way we are as Nigerians. So how have you been able to manage and balance, the different cultures that, we both have?
Okay. Anybody?
Good evening, Shola. My name is Sharon Okoye. I've been here for 6 months. Like she said, in fact, I had to take your picture now. It's a privilege talking, in fact, standing here and talking with you. From what you said, you've been in banking all your life. But how would you advise someone that has been in the banking sector for a while, but apparently has a bigger picture, which probably might not have something to do with banking, or may have something to do with banking somehow, but I don't know how to put it because, yeah, okay. She's saying I should say it because I've told her. Funke is saying, say it. Okay, I probably might not call it a name, but she knows it. But it's a big picture, it's a global picture. But you think you've been in banking, how do you live and go there? Or how do you get there being in banking? So it's a bit complicated, actually. Thank you so much. She understands my question.
All right, Shola, good evening. It's nice having you here around. I think mine is around how do you balance being a mom, a career woman, a wife, a minister? Exactly. So we have different phases and different parts of our lives. And I remember once I asked you about something. You said something about stakeholder. And you said something about that the biggest job is around managing and ensuring that all stakeholders are taken care of. So you can't take care of one stakeholder at the expense of the other stakeholder. So mine is around how do you ensure that every stakeholder in your life, is well balanced.
And how she has balanced the stakeholders. That will have been my question. Shola, you have the floor.
Okay, very nice questions. I think I'll start with female sponsorship. I think any type of sponsorship is a good thing, male or female, in the sense that organizations are pyramids, and based on legacy issues, invariably you find the majority of the senior leadership are men. Now, usually sponsorship comes from the top down, So my experience is that the leadership team, not so much an individual, must support you, okay? And you're always being observed, whether you know it or not. So somebody you don't even know at all, or maybe I've never even spoken to, might have to participate in a conversation about you. And I'll tell you, they will have a view. You know, so I think any type of sponsorship is good, you know, as long as it's done, you know, professionally. But you can't rely on somebody sponsoring you. Do you understand what I'm saying? You can't rely on somebody sponsoring you. You have to be able to win the respect and credibility of a whole range of stakeholders. You know, so it's never one person. And even if that one person sponsors you, okay, takes you so far, that person can leave, you know. So I think the most important thing is making sure that you're constantly aware that you're being observed, and, you know, how you take decisions, how you manage yourself, how you comport yourself. You know, even dressing is important. You know, you're a woman. If you don't comport yourself and dress in a professional manner, people look at it. And it makes them nervous. They might not say so, you know, but so you have to learn how to comport yourself professionally in everything, every aspect. You know, nobody should tell you that you wear a dress that the cleavage is by your navel and you think it's cool. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean? Or you wear one very tight skirt that you actually can't walk, but you're just there. You know, you've got to. I mean, you can look very nice, but be professional. Okay, so I think that takes care of that. Different cultures, yeah. South Africa is very different. I'm still learning. But I think learning from others as well. So, you know, there are people who have been there longer than you. They'll guide you. I remember they was telling me how when Victor Williams first got back to SA, so he'll call meetings of his unit. Like, today's Friday, like 3 o'clock on a Friday in Joburg. And somebody called him, said, this is not Nigeria. It's not Nigeria. You can't, because so they respect their private time, they respect their privacy. You know how you have a session on Saturday in Nigeria? How? No. You don't, you know, it's not right, you know. So I'm just saying that you have to know that you have to respect that. And, you know, before I actually moved to Joburg, I used to think, oh, people were very, you know, I don't want to say lazy, but laid back. But they work very hard. People work very hard. You know, they start early. People are at work from 6:30, 7, and they work through 4 o'clock. But even when they leave, they're working. You know, sometimes they're leaving, so they're doing the flexi time where they go and work at home. They're trying to beat the traffic. But in terms of productivity, you can't drop the ball. You know, so I would even say they're more productive than in Nigeria. You know, so we have lessons to learn in terms of just getting work done and getting it on time and, you know, delivering. I think the last thing I'll say about sort of culture is it's a very, at least in the cities, everybody lives a very individualistic life. So there's no sense of community. You know how, at least if you are living in Nigeria, you know who your neighbor is. Even if you don't talk to your neighbor, you at least, you see that this has a man, a wife, 2 children, and a dog. And maybe it's a legacy of apartheid, you know, but you just leave your house, you leave the office, and you go to your house and you lock your door. There's no. When I was looking for a place to stay at first, I kept on asking, don't they have sort of like gated communities with communal pools, you know, and things like that? No, they were showing one big house with one big pool. I said, me alone in this big house. you know, so somebody else told a story about how he'd been living somewhere for years, and then he'd never met his neighbor, and then he realized the Wi-Fi signal, shows the neighbor's name. So he said, you are Mr. Naidu, okay, you're Mr. So that's another different sort of cultural aspect of it that you get through. But I travel so much that it's not really a problem, but you have to adapt, you learn, you observe. If you're not sure, you ask, rather than do the wrong thing, and you begin to learn. But people, sometimes I go to the shops and they speak to me in Zulu. I think I'm South African. I quietly smile, but I'm going to learn Zulu, at least enough to get by. Banking sector for a while. Every job, you develop core skills, when you're working. Skills that are transferable across industries. So because you work in a bank doesn't tie you to the banking sector. That's the first thing. You've developed a set of skills. You might not even know some of those skills that you have. Because the banking sector actually prepares you, I think, quite well, for the outside world. So you need to even recognize and understand the skills that you have. I think also your time in any organization has given you a network of relationships or people that you know. And I always tell people, never leave an organization on a bad note. It doesn't make any sense. Even if they were very wicked to you, even if they, you leave smiling, thank them for the time and the experience that they gave you, and leave on a good note. Because you never know how you might need them. It could even be a child or a relative that wants to work there in future. It doesn't make any sense to just burn your bridges. Like I said, no matter how much you feel you might have been badly treated. So you've got a network, of relationships that you've built over the years, which you might need in future. You might be a future client. They might be clients of yours. So it's good to preserve the relationships. And I'll give you an example of my niece. She was working in GT for many years, and her passion is fashion designing. So she kept on saying, "Oh, I want to leave. So her husband told her that, I think he said when she has built up savings for, I think, 6 months or something like that. I can't remember what he told her that, then leave. So create a buffer for yourself. Plan it. It's not something that you just wake up one day, with one dream and you disappear. Plan for a smooth transition where you have some buffer, whether it's 6 months or a year. If you are going out and doing something different or working for yourself, that will help you through that transition period. And there are things you can even do. In fact, the best way I've heard it done is that you actually start doing that business while you are working, if you have the capacity to do so. And as long as it's not in competition with the financial institution, because our outside business interest policy is very clear. If you don't know it, go and read it. So, for instance, if you are growing tomatoes, it's not in conflict. Okay? You can be growing it happily. So if you are, for instance, looking to move into agric or an agro-allied business, it's something that you should actually start, whether it's as a hobby or whatever, just begin to do it, if you have the capacity, not the one that interferes with your job and you get fired, but if you have the capacity, it's a good way of transitioning into whatever it is you want to move into. And I hope I've answered the question, or is it I didn't answer it well? I didn't. And you didn't. Okay. The other thing I tell people again, I tell people, and it's a very good lesson in the sense that you cannot solve a problem that nobody knows. I'm serious. Many people are, and they say sometimes when people come and tell you their problems, they never tell you everything. So they'll tell you like at least maybe 75%. They will never tell you 100%. So you actually cannot really solve the problem. You can, try. But whatever it is that you want to do, as long as you're not selling drugs or something like that, it's not something that you should be afraid of. And like I said, if it's something technical, I don't know what it is, so I can't answer the question. And the fourth point is on, balancing. I remember hearing something Funke said once. I think it was in response to a question at one of the Blue Women sessions, and where somebody was complaining about doing a lot of at work. And if I remember correctly, Funke said something like, that you never know whether all of that is helping to build your capacity. Your ability to do many things comes out of doing many things. So your capacity grows, and it doesn't come like this one day and then next day. No, you build it. You get better at doing it. And the other thing again is prioritization. In terms of managing stakeholders, I don't think they're all equal. Your family comes first. Okay, when you leave this place, it's your family that you're stuck with. So I think in terms of priority, if you're looking at various stakeholders, you have to put your family first. And obviously, putting your family first does not mean that you ignore work, or you don't do your work, or you skive. It just means that from a prioritization perspective, you've got to organize your life, around the important things that are important to your family, which might be at your own cost. So you might have to take leave at a time where you don't really want to take leave, but it's convenient or it's important for a family member to do so. But you have to balance your stakeholders. You've got to prioritize. You've got to take decisions that simplify your life. I always tell people my journey is to continue to simplify my life. Anything that introduces complexity, I just run away from it. I cut my hair because it simplifies my life. People laugh. It's a practical reason. The day I stop work, I don't have to be waking up in the morning. I'll grow my hair like this too. So it's not because I have nothing against that. I just don't have the time. So you've got to organize yourself, where you live, where your children's school, just to take stress out of the daily life, and that comes at a cost. So it's a commitment. You've told yourself that, okay, you're going to pay more for rent because it's going to simplify your life, which means that maybe you might not be able to travel as much as you can or whatever. But those are clear decisions which ultimately pay in the long term, because you have a much more sort of structured lifestyle that is sustainable. The other one, commuting 5 hours every day, it's just, after a while, something will break. Something will break, So you've got to build capacity. You've got to make sure you prioritize, simplify your life as much as possible, and organize yourself in a way that you have good domestic help, When I moved to Joburg, my children, especially my daughter, was still in school here. So the domestic help I had, they couldn't do her homework. So they sent it to me on WhatsApp. Me, that I'm traveling all over the the Wi-Fi is not working, it didn't come through. So I realized I had to make a plan to change everything. I mean, in the end, I just sent them to UK boarding school, and it's more structured. Things are more organized. But I'm saying you've got to sort yourself out and put a realistic, credible plan in the best interest of everybody. Or like I said, something will break. I think I've answered 4 questions. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Will we take 3 more questions? Yeah? Can we take 3 more questions? Okay. But before that, I have a formula for you. SO. What is SO? Who can tell me what SO means? From what you just told us last. You are in the training school, you've forgotten. Structured. No. Simplify your life. Trust you. Please give her a round of applause. Eh? What's the O? No, O. What's the O? O. Organize your life. Who said that? Shola, maybe you forgot. I trained as a teacher. So please, you excuse me. I was a teacher at Uko before I joined Stanbic IBTC. S-O. Please don't forget that. Simplify your S and O. No. S and O. You are not complicating it again. S and O. Simplify and organize your life. Chicken now. S and O. Simplify and organize your life. Is that our takeaway? Yes. Thank you, students. Questions? Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Shola. My question is really around women in the bank. Can't hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. My question was around women in the bank, and specifically around your comparison on what you've perceived while you've been in Standard Bank South Africa in terms of how they support and empower women in the bank. And when you do a comparison to Stanbic IBTC, are there any sort of perceived learnings that we can also embrace here in terms of empowering our women? Or actually, could it be vice versa? Could it be that we're actually far more progressive? So we're just interested in the comparison.
Thank you. Before you, Shola.
Hi, Shola. So my question is around your early days in banking. I mean, some of us are just literally starting out. And I'd just like to know, what were your guiding principles? Because we see you decades later, and it's like, okay, but at the beginning, what did you have at the back of your mind that pulled you through this far?
Thank you. Can I go on, Shola?
Evening, Shola. Quick question. With the benefit of being in Joburg and close to the seat of power and the powers that be, it will be useful to understand, with the benefit of that access, what you think we can do better in terms of engaging with the center and also driving our message across to the center and helping them understand our business and what we're looking to achieve better.
Business. Shola Kairena. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Shola. Yeah, it's a privilege being here, and I'm happy I made it. My question is, you've been through the ranks, you've worked with ferocious men, and I would like to ask, what were your threats, especially working around men and rising through the ranks, and, kind of eventually even going above and beyond? Then secondly, I would like to know at what level you joined Stanbic, and maybe that will guide me as per how you rose through the ranks. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Shola. I think there's one hand there. So I have two questions for you, Shola, from a session we ran. So we had a Blue Women Speed Mentoring session, and a few of us had the task of sitting around the mentoring the circles as mentors, answering questions and moving around. And two of those questions came back to me now. I answered at that time as best as I could, but I thought we should hear from Shola because it's going to even be better. So one of the ladies asked me, so Funke, this is Nigeria, and we're Nigerians and we know the Nigerian culture. She said to me, I watch you at work and I see you supervise men. I see men report directly to you. And I wonder how you're able to deal that easily, seeing that this is Nigeria. And in the context, culturally, men are, expected to be the ones supervising women, she said. So she thought, so how are you able to, go around that culture and in the work context, just supervise men easily? And I thought we should hear Shola's view as well. So the second question from the mentoring session again was, so have you ever at any point in your career felt threatened? Not threatened, but, sort of put down because I'm a woman. So somebody has discriminated against me, and I know it is because I'm a woman. Maybe a decision I got passed over by one or two, decisions, and I know it's simply because I'm a woman. So I got asked those two questions, and I thought that we should field back to the highest authority. Thank you, Shola.
Thank you. So the first question on women in banking and comparing SA with Nigeria, I think that was the question. Yes. Yeah. I remember Barine Beard. She used to be the head of marketing in Nigeria. She's South African. And she said, it wasn't until she came to Nigeria that she realized that South African men, what's the word? Where they discriminate against women. There's a word, they're sexist. Chauvinists, they're male chauvinists. She said she didn't realize it until she came to Nigeria. Because, Nigerian women, normally you don't believe anything can hold you down. In the sense that you don't need permission to speak. You don't, and I think it's maybe really how the countries, at least significant parts of the country, maybe not everywhere, where in school, boys and girls are treated the same, even at an entry level in a workplace. Typically, you get the same pay salary when you join. There's, in the US, it's different. You can have entry level, exactly the same qualification, and they'll start the man at a higher level. Yeah, Nigeria is a very equitable, I think, at least at the entry level. Maybe because we just don't have the well, you have to be able to stand your own. You've got to be able to be professionally competent, and not feel intimidated. Many times, men who know less than you speak with more confidence. And it's just something that we have to keep on encouraging ourselves to do, and to always to put up your hand. There's an opportunity, I can do it. Why not? So the comparison, I think we're a bit ahead in terms of empowerment of women. But having said that, I think on both sides, you probably have a mix of both types of women. Early days in banking. So I joined Now Merchant Bank in December 1984. I remember, as an executive assistant out of school. And you know, when you're in university or doing an MBA, you think you know many things. You think you actually know a lot. So it's when you start working, you realize you don't know anything. You know, and all education does is to train your mind to learn. Because once you start work, they have to teach you. They have to learn. You have to learn. You know. But I started, you know, like any graduate, didn't have two heads. I was struggling. I remember the interview I had with the late Chief Wole Adeosun. He was the managing director of NAL at the time. And he asked me a question. He said, he had asked me all kinds of questions. And finally he said, "Am I a nice girl?" So I wonder what kind of question is this? And I thought, and I told him, "Well, I'm serious." He said I gave him the right answer. This was what I gave him the right answer. So I think you just have to face your front and work hard. You know, and like I said, not get distracted by somebody is chasing you or not chasing you or that kind of thing. And having said that, really, it's not that, you know, there are people who meet their life partners in the office. There's absolutely, in fact, there's no restriction or boundaries as to where you can meet a life partner. But I'm talking about more being serious and people perceiving you to be serious. You know, it's important. And when I think of I think there was a question on whether had been overlooked because of the fact that I'm female. Usually now, after about 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, you're sent on a banking course. In those days, at least, a corporate banking course. And so it was time for me to go on that course. And myself and another gentleman, we started on the same day. Our names were put down for that course. And somewhere along the line, I don't know, my name was dropped. So it was only him that was going for the corporate banking course. And so, you know, someone told me that, well, you know, this general manager was the person that had the call as to who would go finally. So why don't I just go have a chat with him? So I booked an appointment to meet with him. And I told him that I was, you know, a bit disappointed that I wasn't going for that program. He was very taken aback. He was very shocked, in fact, that I came to ask him that question. You know, so I don't know, he mumbled something. But the next year, you know, my name was on, and I went for the program. You know, so you know, you might say maybe it wasn't because I was a woman, but you know, it's always easier to drop the woman. Even amongst women ourselves, you see a group of people. I mean, you have to choose one person. You know, it's your DNA. Your logic is that maybe this woman will go and get pregnant or something. I have a budget to meet, you know, which is so important. Why being serious is so important. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because whether you're pregnant or you're single, frankly, it shouldn't affect your productivity. It shouldn't. This world of emails and everything, you can be, even in the hospital, you can be marketing the medical doctor or whatever, you know. And if you are perceived to be serious and to be hardworking and to do your work, you know, those things don't really impact you. I think the last thing I'll say, which I've said before, but since there are a couple of new people around, is really just making sure that you're not disrespected. You know, because you're new, because you're young and everything. And I always tell the story of one elderly male clerk in Now. And I was extremely rude to me, and I was just shocked. And I went to meet him. Why are you rude to me? I haven't been rude to you. So he himself was shocked that I was asking him. You know, but he never was rude to me after that. He was never rude to me after that. And I wasn't fighting with him. I just really didn't understand. You know how Nigerians many times, they just talk anyhow. You know, you go here, you know, whatever. You don't have any right to disrespect anybody. I have very strong views about that, and I always repeat it. As professional colleagues, nobody has a right to disrespect it. Whether you're junior, senior, equal, whatever it is, you're a professional colleague, you're working here, you know, doing a job. Even if someone doesn't do their job well, it still doesn't give you a right to disrespect that person. You can fire a person, it doesn't give you a right to disrespect the person. What you owe the person is to be candid, you know, to sort of give the person the support they need. If they're not up to scratch, you still, but there are banks where people are physically abused. It's not acceptable. It's unprofessional. It's unprofessional, you know. It shows a lack of restraint, you know, in that environment, you know. So just refusing to allow anybody to disrespect you, I think, is important. And, you know, for you to do that, you must also comport yourself, you know, in a manner that, you know, people do respect you. And then there's a question on, I can't read my own writing. No, before I got to, okay, yeah, business, engaging close to, you know, first is that you can never over-communicate. You can never over-communicate. You know, in fact, one of the things, again, about Joburg is you have a whole variety of accents. So two people might talk, and they didn't understand what they said. So, you know, I'm serious. In fact, I remember we used to have meetings before, and afterwards I'll ask Helmut, what did they say? Was that a yes? Did they approve it? Didn't approve it? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because you can, I'm serious. You have different accents, different ways of saying things, different mannerisms, different, you know, and things get lost in translation. So you can't over-communicate. You have to make sure the person really understands what you're trying to say, and you have to make sure they understand what you are trying to say. And the reality is that in Joburg, we're 19 countries, in Africa regions, there's so much pressure, regulatory, etc. There's so much to do all the time that you have to invest in building relationships. So as part of your calendar, you put there you are going to Joburg. You're not just going there because you have one training course. Then when you are running away from one place to the other, you dash somewhere for 30 minutes. It's investing. When I think now of how I used to act before, I know I didn't put in enough time in investing in just building relationships, letting people understand, you know, current situations, the implications of current situations, how you're thinking through it. And the more you communicate, the more understanding there is. And, you know, the older you get as a banker, many deals that look wonderful, there are all kinds of things that can go wrong that nobody thought about, even the promoters themselves. You know, so it's a humility in accepting that there are many things that maybe you don't know, and being willing to learn, you know, from people who have maybe been longer in the game, that will help to build the confidence, and also how you deal with situations. You know, if people see you taking ownership, dealing with situations, handling things, you know, in a manner that best minimizes the risk to the organization, then, you know, I think you, it's easier to get an ear. So what were my threats and what level I joined? I've answered the question about what level I joined Stanbic. I joined IBTC. No, I joined NAL as an EA. Then when I moved to, when IBTC was being formed, I was like an assistant manager. I'd been promoted to an assistant manager in NAL. And then I moved to IBTC as a manager. So a deputy manager, I think it was a manager. Okay. And then I got promoted over the years, ultimately to a general manager, then an executive director of IBTC. And then after the first merger, I was the executive director of the larger entity. And then the second merger, I was initially appointed acting managing director because the CEO of Stanbic that they thought would become the MD resigned. He said he wasn't doing it again. Though he's come back now. It's Greg Brackenridge. And Mr. Peterside, who was the MD of IBTC, said he wasn't going to be a MD of International Bank. So there was a gap, and I was appointed acting MD. But the idea, and it talks to the point about who a leadership wants to appoint. It was felt at that time that you needed somebody from Standard, that knew Standard Bank very well, had the relationships, understood all the policies to help manage the institution through that transition phase. And they were absolutely correct. So Chris knew, there were problems. He knew who to phone. If it was me, I haven't finished knowing the people in Nigeria. Would I even know who to, So when Chris came, so I think I was acting managing director for like 3 or 4 months. And then Chris came the following year, and I became deputy CEO underneath him. And that was until he left, I think 4 years later. Then I was appointed MD of the bank first, and then the group. And even when I was the conversation as to who would take over from Chris, it wasn't only my name on the table, and there were people who were for and who were against. So like I said, at the end of the day, it's not a right, and you can't control it. But enough people have to be comfortable, and nobody's ever ready for the role. They said Barack Obama was too young for the role. Nobody's ever ready for a role, but with the right support, you can probably handle any new responsibility. So the 2 questions from Funke, very interesting questions. I've answered the second one. Yeah, I've answered the one about whether I was ever put down. The one on Nigerian culture and controlling men and all of that. I think there's a deeper question, which is, can you rise above your cultural biases to progress, to operate at a higher level? Because every country has its culture. It's just, they do things. This is how we do things here. Even in Nigeria, there are different cultures across the country. But when you get to the global arena, it's a different ball game. Nobody's interested in there's some things that are accepted practice, or there's some things that you just can't do anymore. So like I said, I think the deeper question is, and it talks to all of us. Reading some of the news on the issue of bribing judges, that happened, and somebody was telling me that many of those contributions, it was like, oh, my daughter is getting married, my father died, in Nigeria, when family members, it's not uncommon. In fact, it's expected. They're more under pressure. It's expected that you do something. It doesn't have to be a large amount, but you just contribute. But we have to be careful and make sure that we kind of just put the lenses over what we're trying to do and say, okay, as a lawyer, it's a judge. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, even though it's a regulator's daughter that's marrying, should I give that regulator a cash gift? Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's rising above cultural practice, which in themselves are not bad, but they don't stand the scrutiny of a higher level or a higher standard. And so whether it's the same thing with even racism. I always use the example of, look, in GE, if you want to be CE, you can't be racist. Their business, they're in over 50 countries in the world. More than 50% of the revenues come from outside America. In fact, they tell you that if you are serious, you must have been in a overseas role. You must have gone to a business development role. You must have done X, Y, Z before you can even be in the running to be considered. You can't be CEO of Coca-Cola and say you don't like blacks, or you don't like Chinese, or you don't. It's not possible. I mean, if you have the right to operate at that level, but you stay in your town or your community, just be staying there and managing whatever you can. But if you're aspiring for sort of CE executive level, you're interacting with stakeholders across different countries, different cultures and everything, you've got to rise above your culture. You have to rise above our culture. And it's something, I'm working at it. Everybody, everybody that wants to improve needs to work on it. So, whether it's men, if you are grown up, kneeling down to all the men in the neighborhood, you have to you have to speak to yourself in the mirror. Like, this is a professional colleague. It's a professional colleague. It's nothing else, And even the other example I always say is, I'm a Christian, so I'll use an example from the Bible. It says you should submit to your own husband. It didn't say somebody else's husband. Yes, it's very clear. Go and read it. Go and read it. It says submit to your own husband. Doesn't talk about submitting to somebody else's husband. In fact, the challenge with many of us is that we submit to everybody else. If your boss says, can you please stay an extra hour? What do you say? Yes, sir. Your pastor will say, please, can you help out with this assignment? Yes, sir. You will go home, your husband will say, please, can you? You say, why? Or, why? If not, it's a genuine question. You answer just say, well, why now? Why? Meanwhile, the other two, you wouldn't ask them those questions, though. So the real person that you should actually submit, you haven't submitted to. So what I'm saying is that we have to just arise above all these various biases and, it's a professional, and even women as well, because sometimes you can even sort of cross the line in terms of relationships. They're professional colleagues in the office, It's not a sister type. Really. So you can be friendly, but the first relationship is a professional one. And you have to be able to relate professionally. The last thing I'll say as well is also, when it comes to behavior, you can't not like somebody in the office. You don't have that choice. You have to like everybody. Okay? You don't have the choice of not liking somebody. The person is a professional colleague. You have to be cordial. You have to be able to get on with that person. You have to be able to relate to that person. You don't go home with the person at night. When you pack your bag, you don't, over the weekend, you don't have to see the person. But in the office, you must be cordial, polite, friendly. Okay? It's a professional relationship. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all.
Thank you so much. People were actually whispering to me that they want Shola to be more today, so that we will not leave here till 10. Thank you so much, Shola. I'm adding 2 more S. Huh? Yes, 2. S for submit, and S for serious. We have S for Shola. So S for serious, S for submit to your husband. I'm going there now. Submit to your own husband. Don't forget. And please get serious. Thank you very much. Thank you, Shola.
On behalf of the entire Blue Women, we want to say a very big thank you to Shola. Shola, thank you very much. Please, can we put our hands together and appreciate Shola? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Shola. We know And I'd like to thank all Blue Women. Thank you very much for showing up at such short notice. Have a wonderful evening.